Again, good evening. Welcome to our launching as we started it a little bit last week, getting our toes wet with our new Bible study comparison with the new book, The Avatar by Jonathan Cahn, The Return of the Ancients and the Future of America. Um, Messianic Jewish rabbi, basically looking at the theme that I refer to as Bible patterns in modern times. So we kicked off last week looking back in time for our foundations for where we're going here to get over here, share my screen, to the Tower of Babel, which was, as you look to the Sumerian texts that correspond to this was built by Enmerkar. We know him as Nimrod, the hunter, and was built as part of his worship towards the goddess, lowercase g, Inanna, also known as Ishtar, also known as Isis, also known as Aphrodite, also known as Venus. Same entity, just from different cultures. And so he built the Tower of Babel here. And just in the short 8 minutes or so of intro last week, I already made a mistake. And it's one of those things that just slip of the tongue where, when you say Peter, but you mean Paul, they both begin with P. I did one where I mentioned that the Tower of Babel, which is Babel was the name given to it afterwards, after what happened. The place, we know the city today as ancient Eridu. And Eridu is named for Irad, who is the great grandson of Adam. I misspoke last week and said he was the great grandson of Abraham. I got my A names mixed up. So Abraham is much later after the Tower of Babel, of course. And Irad is actually much earlier than the Tower of Babel. The original city here was named for him. He is the son of Enoch, who's the son of Cain, who's the son of Adam. Now, the first city the Bible mentions to us is the city and it's spelled in the Bible, Erech, Erech. We know it as Uruk today. Modern Iraq is named for it. That was the city that Cain named for his son Enoch. You might notice, well, drop the N. And I use the example, well, my name, coming from Spanish to English, my name drops the N from Enrique to Eric. And so back in the early days, Cain built the city of Uruk for his son Enoch. And before that, the very first city, Enoch had built this city, Eridu, for his son Irad, and had this temple here. Well, over time, before and after the flood of Noah, more and more temples were built there until the 17th temple, the last one, ended up being the Tower of Babel. And so we are starting with this. And last week we looked at the passage in Genesis 11, first 9 verses or so. So real quick, going back, this is a recreation based on the excavations and what it would look like. And notice the platform is kind of barren and nothing built on top of it because they didn't finish it. And so that's then, and this is now. That is the remnants of it here in modern Iraq here. The we have here the Persian Gulf here. It actually came in a little closer to the shores there at that time. So why are we starting with the Tower of Babel, which is actually not in the Avatar book? I chose specifically to go here. And I wanted to go here because this is really the start. Notice, leftover bricks. This is the start of the spread of the dispersion of the different cultures that would develop in their different regions. What we are going to be looking at with our series on the Avatar study is we'll be tracing one of the links that went through that. We spent a lot of time, and a fair amount of time, rightfully so. Think of Noah's sons, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. We spent a lot of time talking about, obviously, Shem. That's the line that Abraham came through, and of course, Jesus and everyone else, the Semites, where we get Shem's where we get the word Semite. We had talked a lot about Ham. That's those who went on to Africa, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and of course, Canaan up here. But we don't talk a lot about the other guy, Japheth. So let's talk about him a little bit here. Then we'll get to some thoughts from the Avatar launching from here. And again, I'm going to divide this up into different recordings, kind of split it off in different little time sections here. So right now, Tower of Babel, I personally put it about 2552 BC, so 2,500 years before Christ, basically. So what I want to also share along the lines of Japheth here regarding to the Tower of Babel and the spread here actually comes to us courtesy of Egyptologist David Roll from the Sunday school classes. He makes this observation when it comes to Japheth and the spread of civilization here. I'll go ahead and close that window here for a moment and zoom out a little more. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. That gives us the idea. Okay. There we are. Okay, so as scholars are studying ancient stuff, they discovered something here about the languages, that there's some similarities in languages between Persian. Persian is from Iran, right here, ancient Persia. So Persian language, the old Indic languages from India, and German and English, and the Latin or Romance languages that came out from Italy. There's something in common with all of those they discovered. The ancient language here of the northern area of Pakistan and northern India, Indus and Punjab regions, there was an original mother tongue, but underneath those, that was the same original mother tongue. They've studied this. That was under Greek and Latin languages, and then the European languages that came out of that. So now these folks here are called, this swath of land over here is called Indo for India, European. I don't know why they didn't go Euro. Well, I guess it's easier to say Indo-European. So going from right to left, India and Europe. Now you think they have very little in common as we think of them today. But going back to tracing these ancient roots here, there's a source that they are connected to. Of course, they spread out and diversified and had their little bubbles in their areas from there. So this Indo-European culture here. And so this language that is underneath it all, they call Proto-Indo-European, or PIE, this Pi language here. And so what's recognized is that these are offshoots of Noah's son, Japheth. They're called Japhetic. And so, of course, they were all in touch with each other until they spread out further from that. Let me give you an example here of one of the changes that has happened since things were established with these Indo-European folks. There are how many months in our calendar today? 12. Which month of the 12, numbers 1 through 12, which number are we in right now? Number 10 out of 12. We're almost done with the year. So we are in month number 10 out of 12, and the name of the month we are in right now is October. And of course, octo means 8. Hey. Yeah. You ever wonder about that? September means 7. No, for November means 9. So what happened? Well, back in the Indo-European days, October was the 8th month, and September the 7th, and November what happened? Well, we had this thing called the Roman Empire, and Julius Caesar, the dictator before Emperor Augustus, so we squeezed in there new months to honor them. July for Julius Caesar was inserted, and August for Caesar Augustus was inserted, and so that pushed everything out 2 months on the other end of things. So back in the Indo-European days, it made sense. October was the 8th month. And so that's what happened there. So when in doubt, blame Rome. And so what else of note here? So these were back from in the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, farmers here spreading out with this ancient tongue here. And we see the spread again from Noah's sons and the Tower of Babel dispersion here. Another note on a level of the God worship and the things that happened. Noah's son Japheth is traced to both of these cultures, as I mentioned, India and in Europe here. In, let's see, the Greeks, the Hittites, which are northern Turkey here, and the Vedic culture here of India, they all go back to Japheth. They all trace some things to him. In Greece, in Greek mythology, Japheth is known as Iapetos. J is a relatively new letter. It's only a couple hundred years old. Before they were using J, they were using I. And so Iapetos was the name for Japheth. I think that's one of the moons of Jupiter, actually. He was the son of heaven and earth. And in Sanskrit, in Indian, Japheth's divine father was Prajapati, father of Japheth, and he is the son and the Lord of creation. So Japheth is regarded closely related to the sun god. And so these folks coming off of the flood were sun worshipers. Ham was also worshipped as the sun god Shamash or Shamash, in the Mesopotamian culture. So I guess I'm not surprised coming off of a worldwide flood that they were on a boat for a year, that they worshiped the sun when they got off, those who weren't following the one true God here. So that's kind of what was happening here. We're going to go to this line here, trace it down to India. Specifically is where we're going to spend a little time. As we go forward in this series, we're going to look at some things from Greece, some things from India as we go. And so to dive into thoughts from the Avatar, here is this thought on what was happening culturally around the, let me see, after this Tower of Babel dispersion here, 188. And as always, feel free to jump in with any thoughts or questions as we go. And as always, when I share thoughts from any source that's not the Bible, feel free to disagree. It's just the thoughts of a human being and just as human as I am. So the Bible is our ultimate authority, and we'll be getting some comparisons here. So just an early note on what was happening with the false gods and the worship coming off of the Tower of Babel. Not only did it start with Nimrod worshiping Inanna Ishtar, but we also have here in these cultures, as they spread out, turning away from the one true God, that their kings would be considered god kings, that they would be considered deity or heavenly beings, that they were the kings would be worshipped as gods. They would even act out the part of God as an incarnation of God. They would have ceremonies where they would do that. Here's one named Dumuzi. Now, Dumuzi, interestingly enough, in the genealogy, the human Dumuzi, a lot of these myths are based on human beings that just later got mythologized. Dumuzi in the genealogy is the grandson of Nimrod. Nimrod's son was Lugalbanda, his son was Dumuzi, and Dumuzi's son was Gilgamesh. And so Dumuzi, when the mythology came around, is like a reincarnation of Nimrod. And you go to the Egyptian side of things, Nimrod's Osiris, and all those different things happen. And so Dumuzi here, coming off the Tower of Babel, here is a version of Dumuzi here as he's fighting off for animals like deer or something like that. So this guy Dumuzi, for example, with his case, they had sacred marriage ceremonies in Mesopotamia. A high priestess would assume the part of the goddess Ishtar, and the king would be her consort, the god Dumuzi, or Tammuz. Tammuz ended up becoming one of the months of the calendar in Mesopotamia. It's even one of the months of the Jewish calendar to this day, but it's originally named for this false god, descendant of Nimrod. And so the king would act the part of the kings in Mesopotamia would act the part of this false god Dumuzi, and the priestess would act the part of the false goddess Ishtar in their ceremonies. So that was kind of one of the things branching off in Mesopotamia from the Tower of Babel. So one of the other things, as we have, as the sign said, that was the first ziggurat in Mesopotamia. It was the first tower of its kind in the world. And we see, as they were dispersed by God across the globe, that they took the concept with them. And we've seen ziggurats all over the place. We went through that in Sunday school. And even on Wednesday nights, when we looked at the spiritual application of rising societies and rising towers that they were building. Now, fast forward about 100 years or so to the 2400s, we've got the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt being built. So now we have the Egyptians and their pharaohs, and this is like 4th dynasty, and their gods. So coming off of the Tower of Babel with the spread of this concept here, what were the things going on with Egypt and their gods? Well, sure enough, their pharaohs would be incarnations of their gods. In fact, in Egypt, the pharaohs would reign as incarnations of Amun-Ra. This guy's got a ram head. That was before there was a football team. Yeah. Here is this form here, Ra as a falcon. The sun god Ra comes in a few different forms. Ra or Re. Another famous one is Horus, which is kind of interesting. I got a kick out of this picture. What's it? Oh, let me go do this here. Say below. the great cat slaying Apophis. So here's a cat with a stick or something, killing a snake or something. So, so that's a version, one of the different versions of Horus. Horus, you know how rulers would be named like Caesar Augustus, Caesar Tiberius. Caesar would be the title. Kaiser in Germany. And so that kind of concept. Tsar in Russia. In Egypt, it was Horus. Scorpion King was Horus or Har, Scorpion. Horus refers back to their mythology to the far distant one, the one who survived the flood and was given immortality according to the Mesopotamian legends, because Egypt came from Mesopotamia. Yes, Horus refers back to Noah. And so they're all carrying on the name of Noah in their present day, looking back to that, not realizing what God was doing with him in the one true scriptural biblical sense of Noah. Yeah, so one of their gods was Horus, and the pharaoh would be seen as an incarnation of him. And there's another version of the Horus, the falcon god there, little chirpy bird head sitting on his throne there. And so that is a look at our foundations with the Tower of Babel and the concept of God King spreading out from there. Any initial reactions, thoughts, comments, questions on that? Well, that closes out this little section, so we'll stop that share and we'll stop that recording and get ready for our next section.